from the grassroots, connecting people and sharing ideas.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Hi, welcome back. This is Grace.
And you're listening to Duet ASEAN, the voice of discovering and sharing. So Grace, today we have someone to talk about Children's Day. And we have Deeppa Ravindran with us now on the phone. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Arlene. I'm good, thank you.
Oh yeah, welcome. And so how did you get involved in the area related to children?
This is very interesting because children are constantly being exposed to this chemical called pesticides in various ways. And what we have found out based on research is that children are highly exposed to various pesticides through different aspects. And one of them is through our food, contaminated through the environment, and maybe they are playing out in the lawn and like there might be pesticides sprayed on the grass. There's also insect repellents, and there's also spraying for mosquitoes and dengue, and children have been exposed to these chemicals. And we have found out that there are really a lot of high risk factors involved with the impacts of pesticides on children's health. What we have also found is that children are very vulnerable because they are younger and their immune system is a bit more weaker, but they also, breathe more air and eat more food in terms of their overall exposure and unit per body. So they drink more water per unit of body weight, which leads to greater exposure in pesticides and the environment.
So what did you do exactly?
We have actually compiled some research and some books, and we have started the campaign. And June 5th, we launched the campaign. We had awareness activities and workshops to create the awareness about how children are exposed to pesticides through various means.
So which organization that you are part with right now?
Currently, we are in this organization called Pesticide Action Network, Asia and the Pacific. We are a regional network of partners, and we also focus on agricultural workers, fighting for women's rights, and also talking about land rights for indigenous people. And overall, we're also in this program, in this campaign, we are just looking into how pesticides, which is a very toxic chemical, it's used to spray and kill pests in various forms. Sometimes if you go to the market, you see a vegetable with lots of holes, and there are bugs eating them, and then these are the chemicals that are used to kill these insects.
So better buy the imperfect vegetables. Is that what you mean?
I think so. If you look at a vegetable and you see a bug eating it, I would feel safer eating that vegetable.
Yeah, it's actually kind of true. But those vegetables that are being sold in the supermarket, usually, especially hypermarkets, usually would be much more polished than those sell in those wet markets. So in a way that probably better go to the wet market rather than the hypermarkets.
Yes, I think it's also good for us to interact with the farmer or the person who's selling the vegetable to find out, a little bit about where the food comes from, because that's quite important. We try as much as possible to eat organic food, but it can be a bit expensive as well. So.
Yeah, that's true. It can be a bit expensive. So for the focus on Children's Day, you want to send a message to protect our children from toxic pesticides. So for kids, why do you think kids are more vulnerable to toxic pesticides?
You see, when children are smaller, they eat more food, they drink more water, and they breathe more air. You see, so in that sense, per unit of body weight, children are more exposed to than adults. And children are growing, children are more vulnerable. What we have found is that there are high cases where children have been exposed, where they have developmental disorders, they have learning disabilities, And this is really one of the concerns because pesticides can also go through the mother's womb if she's exposed and affect the child, the growing child. And that's one of our concerns. There's also many relations to asthma and allergies, if there's a spraying going on, many other hormonal problems and neurodevelopmental problems also.
So for this, definitely children are more vulnerable in terms of organs development, and also, it's very common things to see how young children, they just, like to put their fingers in their mouth and toys or whatever object they see. So they can lead to all those effects after all. But what kind of food are you focusing on, that children usually consume? Like, they like to eat like juice or potatoes, eggs, pork.
What we have found is that there are cases where baby food is contaminated with pesticides.
You're talking about those kind of pre-packaged baby food, or you're talking about mothers who cook like porridge for their babies?
Food generally may contain pesticides if it's not organic or if it's not grown in an agroecological way. So there are possibilities where the pesticides may be found in your food. So we don't know the extent of how much chemicals may be in there, at least for the Asia Pacific region.
Hey, sorry, just now you were the phone lines just suddenly got cut, but now Deeppa is still on the line with us. So hi, Deeppa.
Hello.
Hi. So just continue from where you you left off just now.
Yes. So children are exposed in many different ways. What's interesting is that the data has not been released in Malaysia because it's seen as sensitive. So we do not have that data available right now. That would be good. I think some of the organizations would perhaps in the future like to do some testing in terms of food and what's available out there. I think that's very important.
Yes.
And also our concern is pesticides found in mother's milk. And we continue to advocate for breastfeeding. We believe in that. But children may be exposed through breast milk. But it doesn't mean that you now should feed children formula milk, because formula milk might have other problems as well, because it's not natural, it's not from the mother.
What about exposure at home or schools or public spaces? Let's say you bring your child, your baby to all these different areas, and also, you just leave your kids sitting on the floor at home. Do they risk having exposure to toxic pesticide as well?
Yes. There is a possibility if the floor has been used for termite infestation and they use treated wood that is chemical based. So we really need to know what kind of chemicals are used for treated wood. Sometimes if we know that there are household sprays to spray insects, children might be exposed to that. There's also contamination in the air if there is spraying done for dengue sprays or something like that when they are when the health ministry sprays the environment and the household housing areas with these pesticides. So children may be exposed to that way. And sometimes for gardening, children are exposed to household pesticides where they are sprayed to the lawn, they are sprayed on flowers, and children might breathe these chemicals. So we are always conscious about that. We try to create awareness about these issues.
So what kind of impact children would have if they are being exposed too much of these toxics?
There are various things that might happen to them. We are always very cautious about that because, for an example, there might be learning disorders. There might be developmental disorders.
Like what about illness or diseases?
Yes, that is possible. Cancer is one case. There are many cases where there's higher amount of cancer that is being recorded, never before in certain areas. Many learning disorders that we are concerned about, childhood obesity, autism. It can be linked to asthma and various other disorders and health problems.
Mm-hmm.
But if people still do choose to use all these pesticides, right? What are the tips or advice that you can give to just to minimize the risk to infants and children?
To be honest, we don't encourage using them at all.
Yes, but then there will be places that they will still do,
I,
you know.
I think it depends on what would be the case. If it's example in the house,
All right.
you see, we try not to encourage them to use the toxic spray. Maybe we can ask them to use the the electric bag to kill the mosquitoes.
Oh yes.
Yes, and there are very other much natural ways that they can use. So there are alternatives available. So if the person is growing their own food, we would like to encourage them to maybe use organic pesticides, which include neem leaves, chili paste. So there are other available alternatives out there. And in terms of farming, there are ecological methods in which you can use. So there are other alternatives, safer alternatives available, so we would encourage them to use that. And also if you're using termite treatment, to just see what kind of chemicals are there, or can they get a different type of flooring, for an example.
But what about in the role of government, especially in creating the awareness, at the same time in ensuring that companies follow the regulation and not making their products too dangerous for young kids? So how are your organization doing anything about it, or you have observed the government or companies making more efforts in ensuring that their products are more organic and safe for children especially?
I do see that there are bans in terms of international bans on highly hazardous pesticides, that they are very toxic, very much a concern for us. In the Malaysian government, I believe that they are trying to ban certain toxic pesticides or not register them. But we also find that in many cases the cause and effect is not clear, so therefore it's very hard to prove what might happen. So a lot of cases, a lot of the highly hazardous pesticides are still being registered. So the struggle still continues, and there still needs a lot of work to be done in terms of banning these pesticides.
So what are the current activities that you will be doing or you are doing right now in conjunction with the Children's Day?
Oh, yes. On November 1st, we are having a children's coloring workshop in the State Library. So we are creating that launch national awareness. And then on the 20th, we are having a regional awareness campaign online. So you can follow us at Pesticides Free World on Twitter.
Interesting. So what kind of activity on the regional scale that you will be focusing?
We have a network of partners from various countries like Laos, Cambodia, China, Vietnam, and also Sri Lanka and India and Korea and Japan. So in terms of the region of Asia Pacific, most of our partners are having activities, coloring activities for children. Some of them might have flash mobs. They also have online campaigns. So we are going to launch as a whole the Pesticides Free World campaign on Twitter. And we are also encouraging people to sign on to our campaign. We have a petition to call on our government to ban these highly hazardous pesticides that cause a lot of health problems for children these days.
What about at schools? At schools, are you reaching out to teachers, to headmasters?
Definitely. Yes, at least for the northern region and in the region of Cameron Highlands, we have had educational workshops for children, coloring activities for them, and we definitely encourage them to join us. We have sent some letters for them to join us for our coloring contest, and this coloring contest is about the awareness of the health impacts of pesticides and children. So we do encourage, and we would love if schools could contact us, and maybe they would like to have a workshop about what they can do, and we would definitely love to work with them.
So in terms of Malaysia, if you're talking about the level of awareness among the public on the issue related to toxic pesticide and how it will affect their children or their newborns, would you rate them as in like very aware or somewhat aware, or do you think that a lot of them are still very much just follow their own routines and not really care that much about how their daily lives and environment would impact their child?
I think there's some level of awareness in terms of the urban areas. And I think in a lot of other cases, people are not aware the full extent of how much pesticides are found in our food. And that's not really the public's fault also, because those data has not been released, and we don't have much information and research done at the local level. Unlike the US, they do have a lot of information available, so mothers can go and find this information. So at one level, we are encouraging various bodies, authorities to release such information. And I think there is a growing awareness in terms of organic food and how much pesticides affect our children. But I think that definitely needs more awareness, and we do encourage people to read about the information and get themselves educated about the issue of pesticides.
Then how about even though the awareness in the public it has been increasing, how about the child labor in all those agriculture side? Because they are not just naturally exposed to all these pesticides. Yeah. So what are the things that have you guys done to reduce in terms of exposure to pesticides for all these children there?
So what our partners do is that we try to document information and gather this data. And at least in terms of the international conventions like Stockholm and Rotterdam Convention, we do bring up this data about how children are affected by pesticides in their working environment.
Yes.
So we have been successful in terms of banning some pesticides, and especially recently, like endosulfan has been listed on the Stockholm Convention. But it's a long struggle to highlight this information. There's still a lot more work needs to be done, because if you ban one chemical, there might be another hundreds of chemicals
Definitely, yes.
need to be replaced. So it's an ongoing struggle.
It's an ongoing struggle. But in terms of, if you want to compare to countries that have successfully, or at least has been quite moderately able to reach out to the public and create awareness and make it in as part of, make anti-toxic pesticide as part of their culture, which country would that be?
Certainly some of the European countries, to some extent Singapore and New Zealand.
What are the examples of things that they would do that do you think can be part of the Malaysian culture, especially among young parents?
What I believe from Singapore is that there is the government, along with the government, there are lots of checks in terms of what pesticide residues come into Singapore, at least in terms of the food. So if they import food from Malaysia or from China, there are a lot of testing going on. And sometimes they do ban certain foods from coming into the island itself. So it's a good collective effort that they are having with the government and the public, that they are aware. So that is one good thing that we can copy from our neighbor down in Singapore.
Yeah.
So and they are also quite aware in terms of the toxic levels, in terms of how children are exposed to various ways. But pesticides is still very persistent in the world, because if you say, for an example, use pesticides in one part of the world, it can travel to another part of the world. So you can't just throw away this chemical and get rid of it completely.
Yes.
You see? Yeah. So what they have found also sometimes, like in the North Pole, there are certain chemicals they call persistent organopollutants. And the Eskimo mothers have found pesticides in their bodies, and they have never used pesticides before, because it's so cold you can't grow anything.
Exactly.
But that is that is because through the food, the fish, and various other items that they have been eating have been exposed. This is a really toxic and dangerous chemical that can go throughout borders. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't discern between one country to the other.
It's so easily accessed to a lot of areas.
So in conjunction with Children's Day, what would the message that you want to share with the children in Malaysia and the parents?
Yes, what we would really encourage is just to be aware about how pesticides are so persistent in our environment, and at least to encourage us to the parents to be aware of these pesticides, and maybe try to find food that has less pesticides in it, and throw away all the chemical sprays, because there are other alternatives available.
With that, thank you very much. Thanks for sharing your views with us. We hope that you are able to do your project, especially related to toxic pesticide awareness among young kids, as successfully as possible, and hope that it will be a culture of Malaysians to ensure that a more safe and clean environment for young kids.